Another feature of housing is that in Islington, and I think increasingly elsewhere, although probably more in inner London than elsewhere so far, the dwellings are changing tenure. So there isn't really such a thing as a council home in Islington anymore, because, as I said, a lot of the Victorian properties that were built before council housing was invented are now in council ownership. Council tenants live in them. A lot of properties that were built explicitly as council properties have been sold into owner occupation, and a lot of those have subsequently been rented on as private rented. So dwellings are moving around tenure. And some of the debates around the proportion of a new development that ought to be affordable or social rented, they're actually a little bit meaningless because of the rate with which they change tenure. Less mobility for owners. The big disadvantage over the last period of being a council tenant or a housing association tenant is that you're less likely to be able to move around. If you don't like it anymore, it's difficult to get up and go. If you become overcrowded, it's difficult to get up and go. Owner-occupiers, of course, found it much easier. That might be reversing. There were some breaks in the budget yesterday for first-time buyers of properties up to 250,000. What if you're in that property? What if you're moving out because you've just had a baby and you need a bigger place? Where's your break? How easy is it for you to get out and move on? Whereas on the other hand, we're using IT systems, better customer care approaches. In the social rented sector, we're actually moving people a lot more than we used to, even though supply is a lot tighter. So that could be reversing. And if there are changes to the law, and that's another debate, but on tenure, on security of tenure rather, that could accelerate the rate of movement in social tenancies. It might do it in a bad way, it might do it in a good way. But we could be looking ahead at a period where social tenants are more likely to move more frequently than owner-occupiers. We could be looking at more stability in the private rented sector as it becomes less attractive to constantly resell properties that are in private ownership. And London, the private rented sector in Islington has grown enormously over the last 5 years. I think it's more than doubled now in the last decade. So if we continue to see that sort of trend, what we're building for, who we're building for, and how we're looking after them to the extent that we still think that way in public service, is going to change. I think after following the credit crunch and the amount of public sector capital that's around, there will be fewer big developments. Islington, like everywhere else, has done very well out of big developments, the rebuilding of the Angel Shopping Centre, but most importantly, the building of the Emirates Stadium has brought on the back of it thousands of new units of housing. I can't see where the next big project is coming from. Perhaps Seema knows, and she's keeping it quiet because it's a bit controversial before the May election, but perhaps not. It's going to be difficult to see where these are coming from. Obviously, there's the Olympics for people in East London. Let's see how good that turns out to be. But I think the opportunities for building new housing, getting investment in new housing are going to be a lot tighter. And also what's happening in the community generally, probably to a large extent because of the changes in the housing market. People can't claim the credit in housing for the fact that people are living longer, but we do have an aging population, and we do have families where children are staying at home for much longer, and I can personally vouch for that with a 25-year-old and a 23-year-old that I didn't expect still to be around. And that's making a big difference to the sort of housing, the sort of communities that we're trying to encourage, and how livable things are. I think that has a big impact on how livable I feel London is at the moment. What contribution can urban design make? Well, this is a street scene in Islington. Some of these properties will be owned by housing associations, some by the council, and most of them will be in private ownership. But that's how, if I close my eyes and think of Islington, that's probably what I'd see. That's what typifies it. And so, you know, fundamentally, what you build, it has a fundamental impact on how people see the place. But I think it needs to go a lot further than that. From a landlord's point of view, and I am the landlord for some of these properties on behalf of the council, they're not easy ones to manage. They have steps up, so when people become disabled, they can't get in and out. They're hugely desirable, and then when people get into them, they find they're noisy, they're not so easy to insulate, and so on. But that's the kind of thing that typifies Islington. I'm going to hand over to Seema, who's going to talk a little bit about how we're trying to change the nature of housing in Islington, and then I'll come back and wrap up in a minute.
Thank you, Sean. I'm just going to talk about one of the things we're doing, and Islington is is one of the leading lights in building council authority housing, and this is a picture or early image of family homes on Bowling Road. It's built now, and I apologise I didn't have a photograph, but it is some of the first new local authority housing for 25 years. What is typical about this and some of the other sites I'm going to show you is we have very small sites in Islington. We're the second smallest borough in London, and we're very densely built out already. What's perhaps a very acute challenge for us is going to be a challenge actually for the whole of London. And so what we're trying to do is think about how we can build new family housing, which is urgently needed because we have a large waiting list for homes, and in the main we need family homes because we already have plenty of 1- and 2-bed flats. So how do we do this on small sites and actually in quite a cost-effective way? Because what happened with this site, Bowling Road, and the next one I'm going to show you, Armour Close, is we did build them out. They were both quite expensive, and cost had an implication for how we dealt with Homes and Communities Agency and the degree of subsidy that we could get into these sites. And it's having an implication for other sites that we might want to do. Actually, we paid for these early ones using borrowing, and we paid for it ourselves. So because those negotiations were just slowing the council down, they wanted to move forward. So these ones are ones we've done with council money. We are doing more now with support from the HCA, but actually we did 2 sets of bids to the local authority home building. The July bid we put in, we got. And we got it because we'd already done these. And then the October bid we put in, we were told our unit costs were really too high, and we didn't really get, even though we are probably delivering and showing that we can do this. The other thing that we found on these early ones was we only got to code level 3, and I know that's good, but in Islington that's not good enough because we have very, very high sustainability standards. And so our newer schemes are aiming higher. This is Armour, and the picture on the left shows you what it looked like during, and the picture on the right post-construction. That's 4 4-bed homes on a small site between an existing estate and actually the back of the prison, Pentonville. Those homes have now been let, and the families in them really love them. They're delighted with them. We're delighted with them, but the sloping roofs were there because the back of Pentonville Prison's officer accommodation meant we had overlooking issues, and that was the design solution, and that was quite expensive. But they are lovely. We're very proud of them. We're happy that our residents are really proud of living in them, but we need to do something to address the issue of cost and quality and sustainability. So what we've decided to do is try to find a new Islington vernacular, if you like. That sounds a bit grand, but we're trying to find a new typology that we can replicate on all our sites. So we're not paying the architect's costs on every individual site. We get a model and it works. It's been quite difficult. We've decided to do it through a housing design competition. And the objectives are to develop a new exemplary architectural form of family social housing, because that's what we need, to showcase this model through a development at Vaudeville Court, because it's no good having an ideas competition. We actually have to build these. So we've picked a real site, and that's what we've asked architects to focus on.